Welcome to my Celebrity Grave Visits, where I visit the final resting places of celebrities that you and I still remember and love today. Today's celebrity visit: the A-list celebrities at the Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. I'm here at another cemetery. This one is in Westwood, which is in Los Angeles next to UCLA, called Westwood Memorial Park. This actually is a famous cemetery because of the number of celebrities in such a cramped space. It's smaller than a football field, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of amazing celebrity memories, which we're going to take a look at today. Well, to start off, who do we have right here? It's Don Knotts, who I used to love as an actor. He was, of course, Barney Fife in The Andy Griffith Show, and then he was on Three's Company as the landlord, and dozens of more movies, The Incredible Mr. Lippitt, and, of course, the Apple Dumpling Gang movies, and just so many movies. I love Don Knotts. And over here is a small actress, but kind of important nonetheless. This is Loretta King. She was actually the star of all of the schlocky Ed Wood movies, like way back in the day, like The Bride of the Monster. Here she is, and then here's her husband, Herman Handler. Now over here we have the famous socialite Eva Gabor. Now she was the sister of Zsa Zsa Gabor, and this was the sister that was the star of the TV show Green Acres. And she also lended her voice to like Disney cartoons like The Rescuers. She was glamorous for her time, but I also thought she really had a good sense of comic timing. Now here is Lady Rowlands. This is interesting because she was an actress in John Cassavetes' movies. And John Cassavetes was actually married to her daughter, Gina Rowlands. And actually, right next to Lady Rowlands is John Cassavetes. There he is, the movie director known for movies like Women Under the Influence and also movies like Faces and Shadows. And, they usually starred his wife, Gina Rowlands, by the way, who's also here in this spot, but she just died in August of 2024, so there's no headstone here yet. Now over there is Armand Hammer's family. Now he is the great-grandfather of actor Armie Hammer, but Armand Hammer was an American businessman, a philanthropist, and a political figure who worked in the oil industry with Russia. It was Occidental Petroleum, and he went on during the Nixon era and Reagan and the later eras to represent America as related to their Russian oil interests. Up next, it's Irving Lazar. Now, he was a major Hollywood agent. They actually called him Swifty Lazar, back in his heyday, and he represented some of the great actors of all time, like Bogart and Lucille Ball and Cary Grant. He was the classic, famous Hollywood agent that was like right out of a movie. And then over here, it's Mel Torme. They called him the Velvet Fog. He was a singer, known for his really deep, eclectic voice. In fact, he sang Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire and so many more. Up here is Truman Capote, of course, the author of some of the great books and movies, Breakfast at Tiffany's and In Cold Blood, a big famous New York socialite. In fact, they made that movie about him, Capote, about his relationship with Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. And, there was also this TV show about him called Capote and the Swans. He was always surrounded by these women, and in fact, here he is next to one of his swans, Joanne Carson. That's the ex-wife of Johnny Carson. She was one of his swans. I think Molly Ringwald played her in the TV show. And up here is Jackie Collins, the romance novelist. She's got over 32 novels. Her books have sold more than 500 million copies. Obviously, everyone knows Jackie Collins. And right here is a tragedy. It's Heather O'Rourke, the 4-year-old girl who was in the movie Poltergeist back in 1982. She actually died at the age of 12 from drinking well water. What's ironic is that there was 2 daughters in the movie. There was Heather O'Rourke here, who was 4, and then the other one, Dominique Dunn, who played the sister in the movie, and she was killed and she was strangled by her boyfriend at age 22, and she's also in the cemetery. Now, she's the daughter of Dominic Dunn, the famed New York author and socialite. Here's Buddy Rich, the famous jazz drummer and band leader. He was considered to be one of the great drummers of all time. He was part of that big band era, with Count Basie, Artie Shaw, and Tommy Dorsey. And moving on, of course, we get to the most famous person probably in this entire cemetery. And of course, it's Marilyn Monroe. And she's been here since she passed away way back in the 60s. And it's rumored that Joe DiMaggio had brought flowers every single day to this gravestone daily. And also, the grave next to it was kept empty for decades because it was reserved for Hugh Hefner. Hugh died about 8 years ago. Here he is now, buried right next to Marilyn Monroe. Yeah, it's I think the draw for people who do want to walk around Westwood and who stumble into these grounds. Over here is one of my favorite Brat Pack members. It's Dean Martin. I used to watch the Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin movies together. They were great. But the whole Brat Pack clan was amazing. And he and Frank Sinatra were two of my favorites. Dean Martin, he sang Everybody Loves Somebody. And he sang That's Amore. I love this guy. Look what it says. Everybody loves somebody sometimes. That is who he was. Here's Carl Malden, that actor who was in The Streets of San Francisco, tough, gritty guy. He was also in On the Waterfront. He played the priest, and he won an Oscar for Streetcar Named Desire. Here's Kirk Douglas and his wife Anne and their son Eric. Now, obviously, Kirk Douglas is the father of the actor Michael Douglas. I really liked Kirk Douglas. I mean, he was in some great movies. I loved him playing Vincent van Gogh. I loved him in the movie The Bad and the Beautiful. Go see it if you haven't. And also he was in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Paths of Glory. He was great. Spartacus. Kirk Douglas, what a class act. And over here is Walter Matthau and his wife Carroll. I loved Walter Matthau. I loved him in all the movies with Jack Lemmon that were directed by Billy Wilder. Like The Odd Couple and All the Grumpy Old Men and The Sunshine Boy. He won an Oscar for a movie called The Fortune Cookies. But you know what? I actually loved him the most in The Bad News Bears. He was also in the big musical Hello, Dolly with Barbra Streisand. Over here is Irwin Winkler and his wife Margot. Irwin Winkler was a film producer, and what's weird here is Irwin is still alive, actually, so I'm not exactly sure. But Margot was in movies like Goodfellas and a lot of Scorsese movies because Irwin produced a lot of Scorsese movies like Raging Bull and Goodfellas, but he also produced and won an Oscar for producing Rocky, and he also produced The Right Stuff. Big movies. Up here is the science fiction author of Fahrenheit 451 and a lot of other science fiction novels, Ray Bradbury. I almost feel like he needs no more introduction. I think everybody on this planet knows who Ray Bradbury is. The Martian Chronicles. Over here is James Coburn, the actor from The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape, and a great movie called Our Man Flint. He won an Oscar, actually, about, I want to say, late in life for a film called Affliction. Here's Merv Griffin. He had a daytime talk show for a long time, and then he became a television producer, and he wound up creating Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, two huge shows, of course, that are still on the air today. He made a fortune. Here's Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal. Obviously, Farrah was the most famous of all the Charlie's Angels, and Ryan O'Neal was actually one of my favorite actors in the 70s, and he was in some of my favorite 70s movies, including Paper Moon, What's Up, Doc, Love Story. Of course, he's the father of Tatum O'Neal, who was also in The Bad News Bears. A personal favorite of mine, Rodney Dangerfield, the guy who gets no respect. What an amazing stand-up act that he had. He became hugely famous doing specials on Carson, eventually did Caddyshack, stole the show, then started making his own movies like Back to School, Easy Money, but I always loved him. Chuck and Ava Freeze. He was a TV producer in the 70s. In fact, he's the one who produced The Martian Chronicles with Ray Bradbury. But he also had a lot of other things, like the Amazing Spider-Man cartoons back in the 70s, which I used to watch as a kid. Over here's Jack Lemmon. Well, obviously, he was the partner in so many movies with Walter Matthau, but he was also in some other great movies that I just loved, like Some Like It Hot, The Apartment, The China Syndrome, The Days of Wine and Roses, and he won an Oscar for a movie called Save the Tiger. Here's Carroll OConnor, or as you know him better probably, Archie Bunker, as well as his wife and his son Hugh. I loved All in the Family. I love the character Archie Bunker. I mean, I don't even look at this guy as Carroll OConnor. He's Archie Bunker. His son Hugh died, unfortunately, of suicide at the age of 32. And here's the late, great Billy Wilder. What can I say? This is the man who did the buddy comedies as the writer-director of all of those Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau movies. He wrote and directed some of the greatest movies I think ever made, including Some Like It Hot, Sunset Boulevard, The Lost Weekend, Double Indemnity. He literally has 6 Oscars. I actually went to film school at UCLA and studied him. There was a class just on him. Here's Peter Falk, which everyone knows is one of the great TV detectives. He's Columbo. I mean, he was Columbo for decades. He was also in, dozens of great movies and films. He was actually one of my favorite films with Alan Arkin called The In-Laws. But he also was like the grandfather in The Princess Bride, and he's Peter Falk. Here's Sam Simon. He was actually one of the original producers of The Simpsons when it first came out. So he's, his name is still on it as executive producer, even though he's passed away early. He passed away at the age of 59 of cancer. He also had worked on shows before it like Cheers and Taxi and Barney Miller and The Gary Shandling Show. But I'm sure his estate is making bank from The Simpsons these days. This is William J. Bell. He was a daytime TV producer and creator of soap operas like Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful, and Another World. Here's Sage Stallone, the son of Sylvester Stallone, who died, unfortunately, 2012 at age 36. He was found dead of a heart attack after he went missing for several days. He was in Rocky V, actually, as Sylvester Stallone's son, as Rocky Balboa's son. Wolfgang Peterson is here. He's obviously a big movie director. Hey, he has a bench with all of his movies on it, like here, Das Boot, Never-Ending Story. But he also did Air Force One, Troy. He did Outbreak. Lots of, big movies like that. He died of cancer when he was in his early 80s. Here's Ray Kniff, another big band leader. He was a trombone player, and he wrote songs like Blue Moon and from the Dr. Zhivago's, that Lara's theme, Somewhere My Love. He was a well-known musician. Here's Ernest Paul Lehman. He was actually the writer-producer for Alfred Hitchcock. He wrote North by Northwest. He also wrote musical adaptations of movies that were turned into musicals. So he actually wrote The Sound of Music, The King and I, The West Side Story, Hello, Dolly. He wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. He won an Oscar for writing the movie Sabrina. Here's Harry Lewis and his wife Marilyn. Not a big actor. He was in a lot of small movies. He had bits parts like in the Ten Commandments. But here's the funny thing. His big claim to fame is that he and his wife created the restaurant Hamburger Hamlet and the Beverly Hills hotspot Kate Mantilini, which if you've lived in Beverly Hills for any time, you've probably eaten there a bunch of times. We're passing by Jeff Morris, just a small actor, but the funny thing is that he was in the Blues Brothers, and he played the owner of Bob's Country Bunker, which was where the Blues Brothers came to play. This is Paul Gleason. He was the principal in The Breakfast Club, but he also had parts in Die Hard and Trading Places. He actually died of asbestos at the age of 67. Carl Dean Wilson was one of the Beach Boys. He died young. He died of lung cancer at 51. He was actually the youngest of all of the Wilson kids, and he was the lead guitarist. What can I say? I love the Wilson brothers. I love the Beach Boys. Minnie Riperton Rudolph was a soul singer who sang Lovin' You, that high-pitched singer that you may have been annoyed by that song in the 70s. She died very young. She died of breast cancer at 31. Here's Bob Crane, Hogan from Hogan's Heroes. I actually used to love Hogan's Heroes, and I loved Bob Crane. He actually was murdered in this crazy thing where he used to, I hate to disparage the dead, but he used to make a lot of pornography with a buddy for fun, and his buddy killed him, and it was a big trial. In fact, they made a whole movie about it called Autofocus. One of my favorite actresses of all time, Natalie Wood. You know, she was Maria in West Side Story. She was in Rebel Without a Cause, Splendor in the Grass. She was in The Searchers with John Wayne as the kidnapped Indian girl. I just loved her. And she also had a tragic ending. She was married to that actor, Richard Wagner. And the story goes that she was with him and she fell off a boat near Catalina Island. And she was only 43. A lot of people thought that Richard pushed her. I don't believe that. Here is Darryl Zanuck and his wife Virginia. Darryl was one of the great early movie mogul producers, the man actually who co-founded 20th Century Fox. He was involved with creating Warner Brothers. He's one of these big, great moguls that that when you think of the heyday of Hollywood and what Hollywood became today, it's because of moguls like him. He won 3 Oscars as a producer for All About Eve, How Green Was My Valley, and the movie Gentleman's Agreement. And here is Richard Dawson, the host of The Family Feud. By the way, he was also in Hogan's Heroes. Richard Dawson, he became famous for being like a panelist on the Match Game, but then when he became the host of Family Feud, his thing was that he would kiss all the women, and he became hugely popular. Frank Wright Tuttle, a small thing, but he was a big, famous silent movie picture director back in the 20s and 30s. Probably did like hundreds of movies when they were doing them weekly. And of course, here's Thurston Howell from Gilligan's Island. It's Jim Bachus and his wife Henny. I love Thurston Howell III. He was also the voice of Mr. Magoo, which was a cartoon that I really loved. But a lot of people don't know this. He had a lot of little great tiny roles. For example, he was James Dean's father in Rebel Without a Cause, and he was great. He was really great in that movie. But of course, everyone will always know him as Thurston Howell III. Next up is actually one of my favorite directors. It's Peter Bogdanovich. He was the movie director behind Paper Moon and The Last Picture Show and What's Up, Doc, and so much more. And you know what? He was a film historian. He would speak with directors like John Ford, Orson Welles, Alfred Hitchcock, and more, and then he would write about it. He was their friend and expert on their material. Here's the story. He was romantically involved with a Playboy model named Dorothy Stratton, who was murdered by her ex-husband. Bob Fosse actually even made a movie about the murder called Star 80. And in fact, if you look here, Peter Bogdanovich is buried right next to Dorothy Stratton. When he died decades later, this is where he wanted to be interned, next to Dorothy. And there's been so many movies made about Dorothy Stratton and documentaries, and it's a fascinating story. And he was in love with her and obsessed with her. Wow, wild. Just a few more here, but they're still my favorite people. Florence Henderson, of course, Carol Brady, the mother from the Brady Bunch. I always loved her. And people also forget that beyond just being the mother in the Brady Bunch, Carol, that she was also a great Broadway singer. She was in Oklahoma, in South Pacific, and had a great voice. Here's Peggy Lee. It's a bench for the great jazz singer. She used to sing in Benny Goodman's band, and she's on thousands and thousands of songs. You have heard her voice over and over. In fact, she's the voice of Lady in Lady and the Tramp, the Disney cartoon, but she also sang so many songs like Fever, Big Spender, and so many more. Janet Leigh, of course, is most famous for her role getting killed in the shower in Psycho, but she is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. She was married to Tony Curtis, so she is Janet Leigh Curtis, although she was remarried. But here you go, the Janet Leigh, well known from Psycho, mother of Jamie Lee Curtis. And finally, here's somebody that I kind of liked. It's Jack Klugman. He was really popular because when they made the Odd Couple TV show, he played with Tony Randall, and he was great. He was also TV's Quincy on television for a long time. I actually know him best because he was an actor in a really, really great movie called 12 Angry Men. And the version with him, there's a black and white, is just terrific. There's more here that I actually can't even get into because there's a private section. Anyways, great memories. I hope you enjoyed this. And let me know in the comments if there's someone else you want me to visit or a place you want me to see. Also, keep checking out my other videos. I've been making a lot of documentaries. Take care.